Dennis Rodman, the most unique player in NBA history by net wins. There's never been anyone like Dennis Rodman, not in style, not in substance, not in the particular combination of basketball genius and personal chaos that made him simultaneously the most difficult player in the league to play with and in his peak years, one of the most valuable. He won 5 championships. He led the league in rebounding for 7 consecutive seasons. He wore wedding dresses and dated Madonna and visited Kim Jong Un and emerged from all of it as a Hall of Famer who belongs in the NBA 75th anniversary team. Net wins gives us the basketball. Rodman provided everything else. The conventional framing of Dennis Rodman is as a specialist, a rebounder and defender who contributed almost nothing on offense and needed to be managed around his personal instability. That framing is correct about the offense and incomplete about everything else. His 91-92 season, where he had 18.7 rebounds per game, 12.7 combined net wins, is the greatest rebounding season since the ABA-NBA merger in 1976. The former formula rewards rebounds directly, and Rodman that year was doing something that had not been done since Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain were trading rebounding titles. In the 60s, the caveat worth acknowledging, Russell and Wilt played in a significantly faster-paced game with more possessions per 48 minutes, which meant more missed shots and more rebounding opportunities. Pace adjusted, the gap between Rodman and the Russell-Wilt era narrows considerably. What does not narrow is the gap between Rodman and every other player of his own era. No one in the first half of the century of modern basketball has approached 18.7. No one in the first half century of modern basketball has approached 18.7 rebounds per game at any pace. The question people argue about is whether the second Bulls dynasty, 96, 97, 98, was meaningfully better because of Rodman. The net wins answer is unambiguous. The 97-98 number is the one that stops the conversation. Pippen missed significant time that season with a foot injury and fell to 9.4 combined net wins. Rodman playing all 80 games. All of 80 games jumped to 11.9, second on the team behind Jordan, ahead of Pippen, ahead of Kukoc. On the greatest dynasty's final championship team, the player many considered unmanageable was the second most productive player in the formulas accounting. Michael Jordan said during the Last Dance that Rodman was essential to those Bulls teams, that his rebounding changed the geometry of the game, that his defensive versatility covered matchup problems no one else could solve. The numbers are the proof. The Bulls of the second three-peat were built around Jordan and Pippen and a rotating cast of specialists. Rodman was the most important specialist in sports history. Rodman's rebounding numbers were not a product of size or athleticism in the conventional sense. He's listed at 6'7", 220 pounds, undersized for a power forward, and possibly small for a center, and yet he consistently out-rebounded players 4 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier. The explanation he gave and that his teammates and opponents confirmed was systematic. He'd sit and watch players in practice and in film, charting not where they shot from, but where the ball tended to go when a shot from that spot missed. Every shooter has a miss pattern. A right-handed pull-up from the elbow tends to miss long and left. A fade away from the baseline tends to miss short. Rodman categorized these tendencies the way a mathematician builds a model. His shoulders were the physical tool. At 220 pounds, he was not going to out-muscle Shaq for position. What he could do was use his disproportionately broad, powerful shoulders to establish and hold angles, to occupy the space where he knew the ball was going before anyone else knew it was going there, and to hold that space against players who outweighed him by 80 pounds. The advantage was not strength. It was information deployed through physics. Scottie Pippen said Rodman could have been the best athlete in the NBA. The claim sounds extravagant until you watch the film. The lateral quickness, the first step burst to a rebounding position before the shot had even left the shooter's hand, the recovery speed when his initial angle was wrong. He was built like a linebacker, moved like a small forward, and he used every inch of that combination in service of one specialized skill that he elevated beyond what anyone thought the position could produce. His battles with Shaq were the purest expression of this. Shaq was the most physically dominant player of his era, 7'1", 330 pounds, generating contact that moved human beings against their will. Rodman could not and did not try to match him physically. He contested angles, disrupted timing, made himself a constant irritant in the paint. He did not stop Shaq. No one stopped Shaq, but he made the process of Shaq operating comfortably measurably more difficult, which in a 7-game series accumulates into something real. After the Pistons lost to the Celtics in the 87 conference finals, a series decided in part by the Larry Bird steal in Game 5, Rodman said Bird was overrated, that he was just another basketball player who received attention because he was white. The quote was controversial then and remains so now. Isaiah Thomas, standing nearby, did not immediately contradict him and spent years managing the fallout from that association. What Rodman was expressing clumsily was a version of a genuine argument. The white stars in a predominantly black sport were elevated by a double standard that elevated the accomplishments above those of comparable black players. Whether that argument was true as applied to Bird, specifically a player who produced 20.7 combined net wins in the 85-86 season, one of the 10 highest single-season totals in the database, is a separate question from whether the broader dynamic Rodman was pointing at was real. Bird was not overrated by the formula. He was at his peak one of the most productive players in the history of the sport. Rodman was wrong about the subject. He was not wrong to ask the question in the manner in which he asked it, unfiltered in the immediate aftermath of a painful loss at 26 years old, was characteristic of a player who spent his entire career declining to be what other people expected him to be. Dennis Rodman dyed his hair every color available, pierced everything that could be pierced, showed up to a book signing in a wedding dress and declared himself his own bride, wore lipstick and gowns in an era when the NBA had a dress code and a very specific idea of what its stars was supposed to represent. He did not do this for shock value alone or only for that. He did it because he had constructed an identity out of defying the expectations placed on black men, on athletes, on NBA players specifically, and he was not interested in performing what those categories required. His romantic life generated as many headlines as his rebounding, Carmen Electra, Madonna, a brief marriage actress, Michelle Moyer, relationships that were combustible in public and consistently more interesting to tabloids than to him, or so he suggested in the various autobiographies and interviews in which he discussed them. The friendship with Kim Jong Un began in 2013 and has never been fully explained to anyone's satisfaction, including apparently Rodman's own. He described that as basketball diplomacy. He said he was building a bridge. Critics pointed out the bridge seemed to run primarily toward an authoritarian government that was executing political prisoners. Rodman acknowledged none of this as a contradiction and continued visiting. His daughter, Trinity Rodman, plays for the United States women's national team, where she's become one of the most exciting players of her generation. Fast, physical, aggressive, with a first step that the U.S. women's national team fans compared to her father's lateral quickness in the paint. The estrangements between them has been public and painful. She's spoken about growing up largely without him. He's spoken about regret. The basketball genes are not in question. Rodman was inducted into the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame in 2011 and named to the NBA 75th anniversary team in 2021. Both are correct. His career combined net wins approximately 120 across 14 seasons do not place him in the conversation for greatest player of all time. They were never going to. A player who does not score, who does not create offense, who exists most entirely in the rebounding and defense accounting of the formula is going to accumulate more slowly than a scorer. That's the math of the position. What the formula does capture is the sustained excellence, 7 consecutive rebounding titles, 3 championship contributions in Chicago, with a number show him as the 3rd most productive player on one of the greatest teams in history and the 2nd most productive player in the final championship year. 2 earlier championships with the Bad Boy Pistons, where his defensive contributions, including Defensive Player of the Year in 1990 and 91, helping form the backbone of a team that beat Michael Jordan twice. The last great thing about Dennis Rodman is that no one who watched him play debates whether he belongs in the Hall of Fame. The hair, the dress, the North Korea, the Carmen Electra, the Larry Bird quote, the Kim Jong Un handshake, none of it obscures what he was on a basketball floor. He was the greatest rebounder in the modern history of the sport, an elite defender at multiple positions, and for 3 seasons in Chicago, an essential component of the greatest dynasty the NBA has ever produced. Michael Jordan said so in The Last Dance. The numbers say so here. Both are right. The full net wins database, 43,000 plus player seasons in every season from 1946 to 2026 is free. Use the link or visit willf123 at github.io/NBA-net-wins. Love to have you as a subscriber. Thank you.